Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Cage Warriors 157, giving a bit of a preview up and down of the card. As I'm recording this, the bout order has just been announced, which is great because sometimes we go off Tapology, sometimes we go off the Cage Warriors website and it gets a bit messy. Earlier today they had, on the Cage Warriors website, they had, who was it that they had? They had someone as the opening fight, which definitely made no sense whatsoever. That's obviously been, fixed and sorted. And now we've got actual bout order. We know the prelims are going to start at 5:30 p.m. BST and then the main card at 9 p.m. BST. So we're in for a great night of fights. You've also got UFC London the day after. So it's going to be like an action-packed UK MMA weekend, which is always great. And I really, really look forward to these all the time. Really strong card here. A lot of fun fights, a lot of good fighters as well, and a lot of new fighters too. So quite a lot to talk about. But before we do talk about new fighters and new things, let's talk about Rhys McKee getting his UFC call up once again. I'm so happy for the guy. Apologies if you can hear my cat just meowing incessantly in the background. He decides that when I record a podcast, it's time to kind of announce himself to the world. So he's probably going to chime in and answer some questions later. Who knows? But again, Rhys McKee, man, so happy for the guy. You just love to see guys like this win, not just in life, but in MMA. One of the good guys, a terrific fighter. So happy that he's back in the UFC. And my cat's going crazy again, so he's also really happy about this, as you can tell. Rhys is just a top fighter. Really good 170-pounder. Very talented, an action fighter. Made no sense to me when the UFC cut him. Fighting Khamzat Chimaev on short notice should at least get you 2 to 3 extra fights in the organization. Losing handily to Khamzat as he did. Had a fairly competitive fight with Alex Morono, who's been perennially ranked for what feels like an eternity at 170. So I'm super happy for Rhys. I think he deserves it. He went on a nice streak in Cage Warriors. One of my big predictions for 2023 was that Rhys wouldn't last the entire year with the promotion and that he'd get the UFC call up again. It's nice to see that they've wised up. They're going to get him on that Paris card, which I'm really excited about. Super chuffed for Rhys McKee, and I just wanted to call that out before we talk about anything else. It's great to see him get that shot once again at the UFC. Obviously, that does mean that at welterweight now, the strap is very much up for grabs. Got a fight on this card with someone who I think should be fighting for that belt or could be fighting for that belt in the future. But then you've got a ton of other people lining up ready to get that shot. So we'll see what happens at 170 pounds. But fact of the matter is Rhys McKee's back in the UFC and I could not be happier for the guy. But let's just tuck straight into this card. We'll work our way from the top all the way down as we always do. So main event all the way to the first kind of prelim opener. So speaking of the main event, we've got James Webb versus Mick Stanton, or Mick Stanton versus James Webb, because Stanton is, of course, the middleweight champion of Cage Warriors. So Mick Stanton, obviously, in one half of one of the best fights of the year against Will Currie. Just a terrific fight. Will Currie was, or is on this card, sorry. So yeah, earlier when I said there was a weird fight that was supposed to be the prelim headliner, according to the Cage Warriors website, that was Will Currie versus Jorge Bueno. That's obviously not the case and would have made no sense. I know they hadn't announced the bout order yet, so that's why that was there. But it just caught me off guard. But yeah, Will Currie's also on this card. So you've got one half of that fight in the main event. So if you haven't watched Mick Stanton versus Will Currie, go back and watch it. It's a grappling masterclass, just a back and forth from both fighters. Stanton doing great things, surviving submissions. You also had Will Currie scrambling his ass off. Just a great fight all around. Controversial decision, not for me, but for a lot of people. I personally thought Stanton won, and I've watched it multiple times, but I've got no issue with anyone who thinks Will Currie won that fight. But Stanton is the middleweight champion, and what a run he's been on recently, like beating Darren Stewart and then, making Darren Stewart look like Stewart was on the way out. And now Stewart's on this great streak and probably knocking on the door of a title shot. So does that, beats Will Currie in the way that he did as well. Just a really competitive fight that, like I said, I thought he won. And obviously the judges agreed as well. But against someone who's much younger, more athletic, a lot more to do still in MMA. Mick Stanton's just a grinder. He's an aging veteran, but there's just something about him, like, he really keeps up with these younger fighters, and I was just so impressed in that fight with Mick Stanton, and here he is defending his belt, which I think is great news for Cage Warriors, that he's being active. And I think the James Webb fight is a no-brainer. Like, realistically, Stanton was always going to probably fight someone in a rematch. It was going to be Webb, or it was going to be Bonner, or it was going to be Currie again. So I'm glad it's James Webb. James Webb deserves his shot 100%. Webb's been putting in work. This is a rematch of a fight that wasn't incredibly competitive, in my opinion. If you go back and watch James Webb versus Mick Stanton, it was a few years ago, I want to say, maybe just before the pandemic. Just checking Tapology now. Yeah, so 7th of March, Mick Stanton and James Webb. So it wasn't an incredibly competitive fight. James Webb won it. So he won it via decision. I thought James Webb won really handily. So it makes this fight super interesting, right? Because this now means that James Webb is going into this fight with a lot of confidence. Could he beat Mick Stanton again? Potentially. But Mick Stanton's, a lot has happened in his life since that fight. I mean, after losing to James Webb in Cage Warriors, obviously he had back-to-back losses against Fleminas and Khalid. And then, he's rattled off some wins. The streak he's on at the moment in Cage Warriors, it's George Smith, Alexis Fontes, Darren Stewart, and then Will Currie, which is obviously the one that got him the belt. So very excited for this fight. How do I think it will play out? I think Stanton's the grinder of the two. I think Stanton's probably better conditioned to go 5 rounds, in my opinion. He's just got that kind of dogged approach to fighting, which is going to, serve you very well in 5-rounders. James Webb, though, is a sneaky good striker, definitely deserves a lot more respect than what he gets. We know him as a submission guy 100%. I get that. We know that he's someone who gets a lot of rear naked chokes, a lot of triangle chokes. He's great on the ground, but doesn't get a crazy amount of respect on the feet. And I think he's a good jabber. He's got good footwork as well. He's not going to put people on their asses. He's not going to knock them out, but over 5 rounds, can James Webb sustain a striking clinic on Mick Stanton? Maybe. But I think if there are grappling exchanges, I fully trust Mick Stanton to be able to survive. I know, yes, has he been submitted a few times? Of course he has. But the Will Currie fight definitely showed me that he can more than handle his own on the ground. I mean, Will Currie put him in some dangerous situations, and he survived, right? So it's a crazy one for Mick Stanton, because even if he wins, like, who does he fight next? Is it going to be another fight with Darren Stewart? Is it going to be Bonner? Can you justify putting Bonner in there after Bonner's lost to Stewart? Probably not, right? But you never know. The way matchmaking works, Stewart might end up on back in the UFC on some short notice thing. So interesting to see how this is going to go. I'm not really in the business of predicting fights and giving out my picks, only because I'm more I just like talking about fights and how I think they will go. But I don't know, if I had to be pressed, I really like Stanton. Not just in general as a fighter, but I think in this situation, in this fight, I think with everything that he's gone through, he's been active recently. He's been winning fights recently. He was so good against Will Currie. I think that will give him a lot of confidence. James Webb, though, veteran, has held the belt before, as we know. Obviously lost it to Matthias Frederick when he got knocked out at Cage Warriors. Cage Warriors 111, maybe 112. No, 112 was when he beat Stanton. So yeah, 111. So a lot has gone on in James Webb's life as well. He hasn't been incredibly active. So his last fight was last year. He's not been active this year. He did have a fight cancelled. So I'm interested to see. I do personally think, even though James Webb has been a champion, has fought 5-rounders, has gone 5 rounds with Matthias Frederick when they drew, I just think Stanton's got that cardio to keep up a better pace over 5 rounds. If Webb's not able to submit him, or if Webb, burns his arms out trying to seek a submission or trying to seek a guillotine or some sort of submission, I think Stanton's probably going to capitalize on that. So my personal opinion here is that I think Stanton's probably better equipped to win this fight. I'm not going to stick my neck out there because I think it's going to be really, really close. And it's probably going to go all 5 rounds, and we're probably going to be talking about the decision later on, in the recap episode. But we'll see how the penny drops in that one. I'm very excited for it though, because I love seeing these veteran UK MMA guys fighting for meaningful things, right? Like, this is the great thing. I was tweeting about this the other day of Cage Warriors with Alzolino on Twitter, and talking about the great things that Cage Warriors does, and this is one of them, right? Like, Cage Warriors, make no mistake about it, is the Proving Grounds is a feeder organization, and they promote themselves as such, and they're very happy to be that. But I think what they don't do is they don't sell out just trying to seek that. Like, it's a proving ground for fighters to really prove themselves. It's not a proving ground for any old schmuck to come in, go 8-9-0 against guys who are 0-30 or whatever. Like, they're very competitive fights. But what I love most is that they're still meaningful fights for veterans. They're still meaningful bouts for these Mick Stantons, these James Webbs, these Bonners, Darren Stewarts, guys that can come in and actively still fight for something meaningful, have competitive fights against younger fighters, against fighters of their own age. I think the matchmaking here is brilliant. I'm really, really excited for James Webb versus Mick Stanton. But let's move on and talk about all the other great fights on this card. So then we've got Jordan Vucenic, who's back after his triumphant win in March, I believe. Great fight that was for Jordan Vucenic. Obviously, we saw how the Paul Hughes fight went. Wasn't incredibly great for him. Showed a lot of heart, but Paul Hughes, that was the Yellow Gloves performance of the year for 2022. So I'm very, very excited for Jordan Vucenic now, who just seems to have found himself again against Tiziano Ferranti, Cage Warriors 150. Back in March, like I mentioned, submitted him in round 2 with a rear naked choke. If you know anything about me, I'll always say I don't think there are many back takers that are slicker and better than Jordan Vucenic. And that's going to sound outlandish because he's just an English dude in Cage Warriors, and I'm sure everyone's thinking of random, insert Brazilian fighter here or insert Dagestani fighter here that is a better back taker, and sure, fine. But I genuinely think Vucenic is one of the slickest back takers in MMA at the moment. And I mean, it goes to show with the way he fights, right? And it goes to show with his most recent performance. But his opponent here is Rhys McKee. I think Picot is how you pronounce it, French fighter, making his Cage Warriors debut. It's interesting because I would love to see Vucenic against more better known fighters. Like, I understand wanting to build him up again, which is great. And, this Rhys McKee may be brilliant. I've seen a few clips and nothing really stands out. He's 13-8. Doesn't really seem incredibly technically gifted in the cage. I'll put it at that. Gets submitted quite a bit, gets his back taken quite a bit, which, I mean, if you're listening to what I said earlier about Vucenic, then that's probably not going to bode well for him, right? But Jordan Vucenic, great to see him back. What happens after this fight for him, I don't know. Like, Tiziano Ferranti was interesting because Ferranti was undefeated, so there was an unknown quantity there. But Rhys McKee here, I'm not incredibly... I don't know what questions this answers for Jordan Vucenic. I personally want to see him against better opposition, but it's good to see him back in action. It's nice to see him in a co-main event slot. Vucenic's one of the best fighters in Cage Warriors, make no mistake about it. One of the best rostered fighters, has been for a very long time. Had a bit of a streak about him where people were saying he was a bit of like a decision merchant or couldn't get a finish, but watch the guy fight, he's always hunting the finish, and I think there's a new and improved version of him mentally. I just think that Picot's probably going to get messed up a little bit in this fight, but hopefully it leads to something better for Vucenic. Still don't know what they're doing. At 145 pounds, Paul Hughes isn't fighting, isn't getting the UFC call up. The belt is sitting with Paul Hughes. Like, that might be why they're putting Vucenic in these, not these favourable matchups, but in these matchups that don't mean much by way of the division, potentially because they don't know what they're doing with it still. So it could just be these fights to keep Vucenic active until they can justify putting him in a title match. Would I like to see a trilogy of Hughes? Hell yeah. I mean, I've always held that Hughes and and Vucenic might have their trilogy one day in the UFC. Like that would be super cool, right? And it wouldn't be beyond the realm of imagination. But could they do it in Cage Warriors again? Sure. I mean, competitive first fight, Paul Hughes, bell-to-bell domination in the second fight. You'd probably have to let some time pass, though, and I don't know that you can always do that in a promotion like Cage Warriors, because people get picked up and people move to different organizations at the toss of a coin, right? So we'll see what they do with Vucenic. I'm excited for this fight just because I'm excited to see Vucenic fight, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm excited for the fight in general, because I don't think it will be very competitive. Speaking of fights that probably won't be incredibly competitive, we've got Morgan Charriere versus Diego Silva. Morgan Charriere, obviously, everyone knows the Pirate, one of the most popular Cage Warriors fighters. I mean, whenever I've spoken about Charriere, or I've posted about Charriere, I always end up with a bunch of pirate emoji flags, like parrot flag emojis, in my replies or in like the comment section on YouTube or something like that. So, yeah, Charriere is super popular. Great fighter. Really kind of go back and watch the Goodwin fight if you want to see a great body shot knockout. Like I always say, that nice run he had where he did, I think it was Monarch, Truman, and then Goodwin, he got the belt. Vucenic, Hughes, obviously lost both of those fights to, decisions that were, I think split decision, a majority decision or something like that. So competitive fights that were a bit dubious on the scorecards. Charriere is a dog, and in his last fight, I mean, make no mistake about it, you saw that dog in that fight against Pedro Sousa, who is 18-4, submission specialist, had Charriere in a choke for what felt like longer than a minute or so. Charriere toughed it out, and then in the last 30 seconds just went balls to the wall and just beat the shit out of Pedro Sousa. Doctor had to step in, stop the fight in between rounds. It was just crazy because Charriere was on his way to losing that round very, very comfortably, and then just pulls out the most insane kind of comeback win, or one of the most insane comeback wins that we've seen this year. There was one in Cage Warriors San Diego recently, which was absolutely bonkers, but Charriere is still showing that he's got that heart in him. I had a tweet earlier from Jamie, Wrestle Jamia, and he said, will Morgan ever fight a guy who's a veteran in the promotion without the fight being cancelled? It's a great question, right? Every time we've wanted to see Charriere in there, we had the James Hendon fight, which was cancelled. Obviously, James Hendon would have been a cool one because he's been in Cage Warriors for a while. His only loss really is to Hughes and Vucenic. Not a fight that we managed to get. The Pedro Coleman fight I was actually really excited for. That got cancelled. We ended up with Pedro Sousa, and now we've got Diego Silva. So with Diego Silva, 15-8 Brazilian. It's got from what I've been able to see online, got a really good kickboxing base. He's had some fights in LFA, kind of highlight reel knockout loss recently to Gafarov. Got a nice win against Askar, though it's a bit controversial. He's fought some really good names. So this is the difference here between this matchup and the Vucenic one. We've not seen Diego Silva fight in Cage Warriors, right? But you can tell that he's someone who is more than capable of giving Charriere a tough fight. I mean, you just read off some of the fighters that he's fought, names that we know. We know Gafarov, Askar, not Askar Askarov, obviously. Daniel Argueta, who's in the UFC now. And that was actually a main event at LFA 131. You also had a fight with Andre Sukumtat, who's fought in the UFC. You got Jay Perrin in there. So you got a lot of perennial UFC guys. Javier Baez is in there as well. Just some good names in there for Diego Silva. Good kickboxing base, nice kicker, good submission game. Be interesting to see, though, he can get finished quite often. So I don't know if this is potentially a fight that Charriere could be looking at back-to-back finishes in. I think this fight personally is going to be really, really competitive. I wouldn't be surprised if Diego Silva puts the boots to Charriere, only because Charriere hasn't looked invincible recently. Even though he's been winning his last couple of fights, they've not been against the people that we want to see him against, really. Diego Silva, though, he's been active, looks a good fighter from everything that I've seen, coming off a highlight reel knockout loss, so maybe there might be some spillover there. It has been a while, though. I think it's been a few months since that happened, but you never know. Would I like to see Charriere and Vucenic fight better people? Yes. Could they not have fought each other? That would have been cool. Could have had a nice rematch to that split decision. That would have been a fucking bonkers fight to put on this card. But again, you got to build these guys up. We don't know what's happening in the division. Seems to be in a bit of a limbo. It would be good to see Vucenic, like Jamie said, it would be good to see Vucenic fight. Not Vucenic, sorry. It would be good to see Charriere fight against more reputable opposition within the organisation, more Cage Warriors veterans, just to build him up, right, and to see where he's at. But Diego Silva could be a really live dog in this fight. I don't know what the betting odds are. Look at me talking about live dogs, and I don't know what the lines are. But I imagine Charriere is probably going to be a pretty sizable favourite. But quite interested to see how that fight goes. I think there's a lot of potential craziness in that fight, a lot of upset potential. We're going to talk about a fight that I'm really fucking excited for. It's Daniel Skibinski, Skibber, versus Maders Fleminas. If you know me, you know I love Maders Fleminas, man. Like, this guy is one of my favourite fighters in MMA. You know, forget splitting things up by promotion. This guy is one of my favourite fighters, period. All action, violent fighter, awkward as shit when he strikes. I mean, he'll be the first one to tell you. I mean, that's what makes him so fun to watch, is that this guy strikes unlike anything you've seen. And it's weird because in the Alexei Mantekivi fight, which was his most recent fight that he won, we didn't really see any awkwardness from Fleminas. It was very polished, really clean jab, and it was really just the jab that won him the fight. It was just the most stunning jab that you wouldn't ever think Fleminas capable of, because the guy's usually throwing uppercuts from weird angles and winging hooks from improbable angles, nice calf kicking from, again, improbable angles. He's a very, very awkward fighter to solve. Just hard to solve that puzzle. I mean, ask Oban Elliott, ask George Hardwick, ask Jesse O'Holin, who's also on this fight, who was 8-0 until he ran into Fleminas. This guy is one hell of a fighter, and I would love to see him fight for the Cage Warriors belt, because, you know, now that we know it's vacated, now that we know that we're probably not going to see, we're definitely not going to see McKee defend it. It would be awesome if Fleminas wins this fight, that he's the guy to step in. I think that's what I would love to see. Obviously, if Skibber wins, you're probably not going to put Skibber in a title match, maybe. But for me, if Fleminas wins, I'd love to see him be one half of whatever they decide to do with that vacant Cage Warriors welterweight strap. Oban Elliott as well, going into Contender Series. If things don't go well for him, obviously we hope that they do, but if they don't, I mean, Oban Elliott versus Fleminas rematch for the welterweight belt sounds like fun to me, right? But back on track with this fight. It's going to be fun. Skibber's a grinder. Skibber's a tough guy, just a proper veteran. His fight against Emil Brown proved that. Emil had him hurt what felt like every single round, had him on the cusp of being finished, and Skibber just kept finding a way. Probably, you know, a lot due to Emil Brown being quite green in the game and not quite understanding when to pull the trigger and when not to. But yeah, Skibber's a veteran, coming off a good win against Brown, but really prior to that, a few losses in Cage Warriors. Lost to Burlington, obviously got knocked out by Judo Jim in Jim's triumphant return back to Cage Warriors, which was a very emotional night. Also in London, I believe that fight was. Or was it in Manchester? Let me go see. Cage Warriors 141 was in London, of course it was. Should trust my memory here as the guy who covers this sport or this organisation for fun. But yeah, the Emil Brown fight was awesome for Skibber, because it was good to see him get back on track. He was supposed to fight Oban Elliott at one point. That fight didn't happen. So, you know, clearly Cage Warriors are pushing him into these big fights. They saw an opportunity to maybe build Emil Brown's name off of Skibber. It didn't work. But this fight with Fleminas will be fun. The reason I think it will be fun is because Skibber's probably going to wrestle a lot. And one thing that I think Fleminas doesn't get enough credit for is being very scrambly, and he's very long, so he's got good kind of underhooks, defends things really well. I've seen him defend some takedowns with Kimuras and stuff like that. Like, he's very, very well versed. Watch the Jesse O'Holin fight. O'Holin is a demon on the ground. This guy's and Finland produces some excellent grapplers. Like, they don't get enough credit for that. Like, Finland produced some amazing grapplers. I know you're thinking of Makwan Amirkhani, but there's loads of others, like Sarasyavi recently, who debuted in Cage Warriors, just brilliant like backpack, rear naked choke. They produce some great grapplers, and O'Holin's one of those. And when O'Holin fought Fleminas, couldn't get Fleminas down, and got handily beaten and got knocked out in that second round, right? So Fleminas is well versed on the ground. He got caught against Pedersoli, got caught scrambling, but that fight was a wild fight for as long as it lasted. I think if Skibber tries to grapple and tries to hold Fleminas down, which is usually Skibber's game. He's a grinder. He's going to get you to the ground. He's going to rough you up a little bit, but he's not going to threaten too much. But I think, Fleminas probably, he's very, very scrambly. If that's what Skibber plans to do, he's probably going to end up not having much success, or he's going to end up getting reversed or getting submitted. I think Skibber probably has his best chances on the feet, not because I think that he's technically better than Fleminas, and like I said, Fleminas is a puzzle on the feet anyways, but Fleminas can get hit. He is hittable. A lot of his unpredictability comes from the angles that he's striking at, not really his head movement. His head usually stays on the centre line for the most part. So Skibber's probably got a good chance if he wants to, he obviously wants to win, but if he really wants to push that, it's probably best to stand with Fleminas, but easier said than done, right? Because you might be, turning your head to the left, thinking that maybe a jab's coming and you're eating an uppercut, and before you know it, the doctor's waking you up with the light in your face. So, who the hell knows with this fight? I personally, not to get too involved, but I really, really want Fleminas to win this fight, because it would be great to see him fight for the belt. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. If Skibber wins, great. I don't think it does much for him in the organization. But this is Fleminas' chance to really look, the belt's vacated, win that fight and start, strap your waist after the fight when you're celebrating. Obviously, he won't get the interview because we know that fighters don't really get interviewed in Cage Warriors after the fight. But, start shouting about it, Fleminas, because if you win this fight, you're right up there with the names you've beaten, the Hardwicks, the Stantons, the Oban Elliots, the O'Holin as well, who I think is going to have a great Cage Warriors career. It's just a shame he ran into Fleminas when he did, but so did Hardwick. Hardwick was undefeated, ran into Fleminas, and look what happened. But some great opportunities here for Fleminas if he does win, and I think it's going to be a pretty fun scrap, because I do think Skibber, while he is a veteran, he's more of an instinctive grappler, as in he will grapple when he feels like he's losing the fight, but off the bat he usually tends to stand and bang. So if he's going to do that, Fleminas, we're in for a great night. All right, so the main card headliner is Mateus Malta versus Luke Riley. Again, man, if you know anything about me, I'm a Luke Riley guy. One of the best prospects in MMA right now. One of the best prospects in UK MMA, probably the best in my opinion. Great strike in Arsenal. Just a beautiful, beautiful array of strikes. It goes to the body, goes to the calves. I would like to see him kick more. I will say that. But sometimes he plants and he strikes with his hands. But if he starts kicking more, which I think he will, we're in for one hell of a fighter in Luke Riley. He is hittable. Most fighters of this age, of his age and of his experience level tend to be. But I think he's always going to fight like that. It's a very kind of next-gen MMA thing, fighting with that reckless abandon, but that's what endears us to him anyways. That fight with Callum Parker in April at Cage Warriors 152, easily the best fight of the year in Cage Warriors and one of the best fights of the year in MMA in general. Not enough people are shouting about this outside of like the UK MMA Cage Warriors circuit. This easily one of the best fights of the year. Callum Parker steps in on 5 days notice or something like that, puts the boots to Luke Riley in round one. Riley survives, starts dishing out his own array of strikes, dig into the body like he does. Callum Parker took a beating that would have incapacitated a lot of men. Callum Parker was a dog in that fight. I didn't agree with the people who were saying that Parker won. I think there's no chance in hell. I know with the underdog we tend to overvalue if they perform really well. Look at the UFC this past weekend with Jack Della Maddalena and Basil Hafez. Same thing, right? Hafez had a really good first round. Second round, Maddalena put the beating on him, then got taken down, and Hafez stood on top, sat on him for like a minute, and people were crying about, oh my god, this is a robbery or whatever. This happens whenever there's an underdog short notice. This happens whenever there's an underdog kind of short notice fight. people always err on the side of the underdog. Not the case here, in my opinion. Luke Riley very handily beat Callum Parker. Competitive fight for about 6-7 minutes, and then Luke Riley put the brakes to him. So another great fight here for Luke Riley because he's being beautifully matched, and this is what I love. Look at all the fights he's had. When he was 0-0, he fought an 0-0 fighter. When he was 1-0, he fought an 0-0 fighter. 2-0, fought 2-0. 3-0, fought 1-1. 4-0, fought 6-4. 5-0, fought 2-0. And that was short notice. And now he's 6-0, fighting 10-3. So we're gradually getting him more experienced fighters. We're testing him out. Like, what's the limit with Luke Riley? And I think this fight is a really, really good test. Mateus Malta, Brazilian fighter. Novo União fighter, so obviously has a good coaching pedigree behind him, fighting out of Shuto Brazil, and Shuto Brazil have given us some great fighters recently, like Jonathan Silva, who knocked out Stipe Burchik earlier in the year, and that's one of my favourite knockouts of the year so far. He's coming off a win, though he hasn't fought in what looks like, I think, 7 or 8 months. Really scrambly submission type guy. Don't see much for him on the feet. I think he's gonna, if you watched the Milad Ahadi fight recently with Marcondes Bastos, I think this is going to go the same way. I think that Luke Riley's going to put the pressure on him early, and I don't know that Malta's going to be able to survive that pressure. I think Luke Riley's going to just get on him, start digging to the body, start with his usual assault, like to the head, to the body. I'd love to see him kick more. Like, I know Luke Riley listened to the last episode of this pod when I spoke about his fight with Callum Parker. If he's listening to this, start kicking calves, man, because you will start destroying people even more than you already are. Mateus Malta, I don't know that he's got much for Luke Riley. If the fight goes to the ground, it would be good to see Riley in difficult positions on the ground against a guy who's going to throw up triangles, throw out palm bars. I don't know that the fight's even going to get to that point. Like the Ahadi Bastos fight, I think it's going to be a lot of pressure fighting that's eventually going to melt the Brazilian in Malta, and Luke Riley will probably improve to 7-0, which, I mean, at that point, I want this to be a slow burn, continue to be a slow burn for Luke Riley. I don't want none of this Contender Series bullshit. I want him to work his way up, get his crack at gold, which is coming. I said it, in the next 18 months, Luke Riley is going to fight for Cage Warriors gold. When he does, we can start talking UFC and start looking UFC. I know there's buzz around Next Gen MMA, buzz around Scouse fighters at the moment with Paddy and Molly. From a casual perspective, from a UFC perspective, let's take it easy with this guy, because what he's shown at 24 years of age is that he could be, one of the cooler action fighters that we have in MMA right now. Because, action fighters don't have a long shelf life, but I think Luke Riley could, provided he's matched up correctly early on, and that we build him up and we see where his limitations are. I'm super hyped for this because I'm super hyped to see Luke Riley again. Anytime we get to see Luke Riley in action is always a fun time. So that will be the main card headliner on Cage Warriors 157. And then we're going to crack on with the prelims. Not going to talk a crazy amount about all of the fights because, there isn't a crazy amount to really break down. There's a lot of fun fights on this card. I don't want to go too much in depth. I don't want to make this the world's longest episode. So prelim headliner, the return of Harry Hardwick, which I'm so hyped about. I listened to an interview of Hardwick with Harry Hardwick. Always got to separate it there. We was talking about the last couple times that George Hardwick's fought. There have been UFC scouts or people just scouting on behalf of the UFC at the events. Harry Hardwick hasn't really had the opportunity to fight on those cards. But this is the day before UFC London. You have to imagine there's going to be UFC people there. Harry Hardwick is a super fun fighter. I feel like, sometimes a lot of the shine goes to George, and of course it fucking should. He's one of the best fighters in the UK. But listen, Hardwick's not far behind him. Harry Hardwick. You guys aren't idiots. You know who I'm fucking talking about. Harry Hardwick is just, he's so good, man. Like, he's got the same striking arsenal as George, goes to the body really well, but I think he's more of a grinder than George is. I think he's more... George is more technically proficient, I would say, but I think Harry's more of the grinder of the two. Like, if he senses that he needs to take you down to win a fight and to beat the crap out of you, he will. But he loves to just stand in the pocket and trade, which is amazing. Steve Aimable fight was one of his better performances, in my opinion. He's on a great run in Cage Warriors. Beat Ndoye, beat Day. Obviously had the draw with Federico Pasquale, and that's a banging fight because Pasquale was undefeated at 7-0. And then obviously he's beaten Steve Aimable. So he's still not suffered defeat in Cage Warriors. And I think against Vitor Estevam, another Brazilian guy, so they're building up a lot of Brazilians on this card, a lot of debutant Brazilians. Estevam's now another opportunity for Hardwick to really kind of build his name in front of a bigger presence, in front of a bigger crowd, in front of a card with, or on a card with a lot of buzz. Really kind of hyped to see what Harry Hardwick can do with the limelight firmly on him. Estevam, not a guy I've watched much of. Seems to be someone who knocked a lot of dudes out early, guys who are 2-8, 0-3. And, now he's fought some better opposition, it seems, and there's a lot of decisions there. So I don't know what to think. He's 6-0, but I don't really know anyone that he's fought. He's fought in Jungle, so I quite like Jungle as a promotion in Brazil. So could be someone that we end up being quite shocked by. But I personally think this one's probably set for Harry Hardwick to get the performance that he wants in front of the biggest crowd possible and in front of those UFC scouts that he's hoping to have there. So Harry Hardwick, Estevam should be fun, mainly because there's a massive question mark over Estevam, and there's a huge exclamation mark over Harry Hardwick because we know that he's looking to do some damage. We've then got Jorge Bueno versus Will Currie. So Will Currie, coming off the title loss to Mick Stanton. Obviously, that was a really tough fight for Will because a lot of people thought he won, and I know he thought he did too. But I love that he's just back on the horse, right? He's licked his wounds and he's back. Less than 4 months later, or almost 4 months to the date, he's back and he's fighting someone who's 8-2 in Jorge Bueno. Jorge Bueno, again, another Brazilian fighter who we're trying to feed into this Cage Warriors card. So it's interesting to see what they're doing there. Could be that they're trying to tap into another market. Obviously, Cage Warriors has always had Brazilian fighters, don't get me wrong. But it looks like they're really trying to do something on this card. He has fought in KSW, Jorge Bueno. So that was this year. And then prior to that, he's had a lot of fights in Europe. So he's fought for Octagon. He's also been in PFA, which I know is a Brazilian organization. So he's kind of fought all around the globe. He's one of those journeyman globetrotters, probably 8-2, as most people say. The saying, he looks good coming off the bus. Very well shaped human being. Definitely not on the juice. But Will Currie is also quite a physical specimen himself. So I'm not going to speculate on what's going in people's digestive systems and into their bloodstreams. But Jorge Bueno definitely could pose some interesting questions to Currie, I guess, as just an unknown quantity. This is kind of shitty because I don't really know most of these guys who are fighting, these Brazilians. So just going off what the little that I've seen, I did some pre-research going into this, which doesn't sound like I did, but I looked at some clips on YouTube where possible and just looking through their records. I mean, Will Currie, for me, that run he had in Cage Warriors prior to losing to Stanton was awesome. The Zlatev fight, choked out Zlatev, knocked out Valley, beat Naglius Kanisauskas, and Naglius is a really, really good fighter. I can't wait for his fight with Belandi in Rome. I think that's going to be a banger. And Michael Chamu, that was a great fight because, Chamu's just an insane striker, really powerful kickboxer, and Will Currie did well to stifle that and survive. Obviously has a couple of losses to Christian Leroy Duncan earlier in his career. But Will Currie's a really fun fighter. Someone that I could see in the UFC in a few years. Still so young at 24. But just seems to have his mind in the right place. I love that he's bouncing back so soon. I like that Cage Warriors are putting him in against someone who's less of a known quantity. Just so you can build that confidence again. Again, matchmaking's just stellar on this card in my opinion. So we'll see how this one goes. I think Will Currie has a lot to prove, especially on the same card as Stanton. He could be calling for a rematch. I mean, again, I didn't think he won, but the fight was really competitive. I would love to see it again. So Stanton wins and Currie wins. Don't be surprised if they match up those two again, especially because the timelines are the same. So you have to wait for maybe one guy to be ready and the other guy isn't, provided they both don't get banged up too much. So yeah, just an interesting fight there between Jorge Bueno and Will Currie. We've got Angus Hewitt and Conor Hayes. Really excited for Conor Hayes' debut. It's the pro debut for Conor Hayes, who's obviously fought as an amateur, undefeated as an amateur at 7-0, has fought for Cage Warriors in the Southeast amateur circuit, and he was champion as well. A lot of submissions and finishes on this man's record, all round one finishes, rear naked chokes, knee bars, Achilles locks, arm bars, more knee bars. This is very exciting, and a couple of knockouts in there for good measure. Angus Hewitt was the guy who fought Paddy McCrory earlier in the year at Cage Warriors 153. This was the card in Dublin, actually. And Paddy McCrory had that beautiful flying knee, which is one of the best knockouts of the year, in my opinion. Yeah, great fight that was for Paddy McCrory, not so much for Angus Hewitt, unfortunately. I was a bit uncertain about him at middleweight, because I know he's had fights at light heavy as an amateur, so I don't know if the weight cut's right for him. I don't know, it feels like Conor Hayes, someone who's always finished fights, he's probably coming in here to get a finish. Transitioned into a pro quite late in his career at 29, but could mean that we're just going to see a more experienced fighter, and he's got some really good experience in general in the amateur circuit. So Conor Hayes probably lined up for a highlight reel finish, I can only imagine. But we'll see. Maybe I'm sleeping on Angus Hewitt here. And then elsewhere on the card, we've got a bunch of really fun fights. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Takamandu stepping in on short notice against Grant Osborne. Really hyped for this one because I felt like Takamandu had a lot of hype in that Dublin card. And obviously it didn't really go to plan for him. He kind of just got dominated and kind of handily beat, which is disappointing for him. But a lot of hype behind him. Great story behind Takamandu. Grant Osborne is 2-0, undefeated, was supposed to fight Nick Bagley. So making his pro Cage Warriors debut, has fought for Cage Warriors in the amateur circuit. Nick Bagley fight would have been fun. Unfortunately, Bagley's pulled out. Takamandu steps in on short notice. Would have loved to have seen Bagley and Osborne. I think that would have been a banger. But this one's exciting purely because it's another opportunity for Takamandu to show us what all that hype is about. We also have Shazad Quadrian versus Wesley Meyer. Wesley Meyer, a guy I was insanely impressed with recently. He'd been inactive for, God, what was it? Like, it might have been, was it like 2 years or something like that? Like, it'd been a while since Wesley Meyer had fought. He had lost to Rory Evans, and then he obviously beat Bogdan Barbu. Incredible performance at Cage Warriors 150. Like, he was genuinely so impressive in that fight. Interested to see how he does against Quadrian, because Quadrian is quite highly rated, has a knockout win over Pav Sahota, which is obviously a great win, has fought some really good competition, even though he's only 3-0. Took Stefano Catacoli's undefeated streak, and also beat Mustafa Nasseri, who was 1-0. So, I mean, he's only ever fought winning fighters. Fighting Wesley Meyer here. Wesley Meyer is a veteran. He's a dog, training out of GB top team. Grindy type of fighter, but a really good submission artist once he gets you on your back. And he's fought some great opponents in Cage Warriors. I mean, Rory Evans, Jack Shaw, Martin Yoni, and obviously beat Barbu, who's not in the same kind of level as those two, obviously, but still worth calling out anyway. So he's back on the horse, so to speak. Quadrian, excited to see how he does. Again, one of those fights where I don't know what the hell's going to happen. Quadrian could come in and be one of the coolest prospects. And he's definitely already got that hype behind him, trust me, in the UK. But I'm excited to see how Wesley Meyer can stifle that just as the overwhelming kind of veteran in this fight. Liam Gittins also makes his return against Elonen Kulmala. So Liam Gittins, another one of the next-gen MMA guys. Liam obviously had that really, really great fight against Rory Evans. Just a banger, wasn't it, at Cage Warriors 152, for those of you who can remember. Coming off a couple of really good wins, Faisal Malik and like I said, Rory Evans. Just someone who's finally starting to put it together. Very excited to see how his career unfolds, because he's fought some really tough opposition in Cage Warriors, and he's practically grown up in Cage Warriors, right? Like, almost all of his pro fights are in the organisation, and a lot of his Cage Warriors fights, or a lot of his amateur fights, were under the organisation. Also has an amateur fight against Muhammad Nukayev, actually, back in 2017. Gittins, really fun fighter, stand and bang. You know what you're going to get with these next-gen MMA boys. and his opponent is Elonen Kulmala, a guy who's making his Cage Warriors debut. Interested to see how this one goes, purely because he's from Finland, and like I said, there's a lot of great Finnish grapplers at the moment. He's a veteran, 16-11 he is. Yes, he's lost a lot of fights, but he's also won a fair bunch, so he's, over 500 on his record. Decent enough grappler from what I've seen, but I think this is very, very much set up for Liam Gittins to go out there and slaughter someone and get a really good knockout. And then, so I'm not wasting everyone's time. We've also got Bailey Gilbert versus Tom Mearns. Mearns trying to grind his way back into the win column. And you've got Wesley Machado versus George Tanasa, and the prelim opener of Ander Sanchez versus Tom Creasy. Ander Sanchez is sick, has one of the best submissions of the year, in my opinion, with a really nice heel hook in a fight that he was handily losing. So worth kind of tuning in for that one. It's the first fight of the night, so make sure you're there, 5:30. If you've got tickets to the venue, that's a fight you don't want to miss right off the bat. But other than that, not a crazy amount left to talk about. So we'll see how this card plays out. There's probably going to be fighters pulling out. There's probably going to be short notice opponents stepping in. It's kind of the curse of recording these so early. But I'm very excited for Cage Warriors 157. If you've got any opinions about the card or anything you want to talk about, feel free to tweet me at YellowGlovesPod or DM me on Instagram at YellowGlovesPod. Other than that, I will catch you guys on the next one.